Centers, and welcome to the third webinar in the second webinar series that we started called the Ask the Expert ASCENT webinar series. We have covered various topics in the part 1 and part 2, leading from cost management to business risk to labor laws, HR, people policies, mental health and well-being of entrepreneurs, to digital marketing and marketing under these uncertainties. And today we have an interesting conversation again towards road towards normalcy. The normalcy, the way we understand in the new world as of now. I'm happy that we are partnering with my CFO for this, and I would like to introduce S. Venkat, who will not only be one of the panelists, but also the moderator for today's session. He is the co-founder of Practice MI CFO, which is India's largest CFO and finance effectiveness services brand that exists in India. I would request the participants to keep posting their questions in the Q&A part and not the chat session, because we have kind of disabled it. We'd like to take the questions only as one area, which is the Q&A part. Over to you, Venkat, to introduce our esteemed panel for today.
Thank you so much, Asma, and wish you all a very good evening. A very warm welcome to the Road to Normalcy webinar. Firstly, on behalf of all the panelists, I'd like to thank all of you who decided that listening to us is more important than listening to our Honorable Prime Minister. Thanks to Archana, Ruchika, and ASCENT Foundation for giving us the opportunity to be here. We've got 1 hour. We'll keep this webinar formal and we'll keep it interactive. We do not have any slides to show you, so there are no PowerPoint presentations today, friends. What we would like to do is to not really talk about the concept of the we want to request the panelists to share their experiences of how they have got their respective organizations back to normalcy. And this is really me anything type webinar. So we're going to be spending most of the time in answering your questions. So I do hope that you will keep us busy with this Q&A box, and happy to try and assist you as much as we can in the next 1 hour. So I'm going to possibly skip the introductions since the bios have already been circulated by ASCENT Foundation. Rather, I'd like to focus my attention on why we have invited these panelists. So firstly, starting with Nilesh, who is the Chief Human Resource Officer at Bharat Serums. Bharat Serums was in the news recently because they got funded by Advent International, a very large US fund. Company does reported turnover as about 900 crores, with a valuation of about $500 million. One of its drugs very recently received clearances for phase 3 clinical trials for COVID. We really need this to succeed, Nilesh, so wish you all the very best. The company has got plants in Ambernath, in Wagley Estate, and also in Germany. I thought it would be useful to kind of get both a national and international perspective from Nilesh. The company has got a union. It's now back at about 80% capacity, which I thought was very interesting. So, clearly Nilesh and team have done a fantastic job of getting the manufacturing operations almost back to normal. Which is the reason why we thought we would invite Bharat Serums and Nilesh. So firstly, Nilesh, welcome, and thank you for joining the panel today. Right, next we have with us Akshay Bector, who is the founder at Cremica Foods. Cremica Foods is India's largest manufacturer of mayonnaise, salad dressings, a leading supplier of condiments, ketchups, and sauces. They recently raised about $15 million from Rabo Private Equity about 3 years back. Massive respect for Akshay. He started the business with about 1 lakh rupees capital about 30 years back. Today, the company does turnover in excess of 300 crores. Reason we thought we'd invite Akshay is it's a perspective from the north. Akshay is based out of Delhi. He has got plants in 3 different states, and I thought it'll be useful to get his perspective on how the regulatory environment is kind of panning out for him. Chemica operates in two sectors, Horeca and retail. And in retail, Akshay tells me that they are well above 100% capacity. So again, a company that has been able to get back on the road to normalcy. So very interested to hear what you have to say, Akshay. About 800 odd team members, of which 500 are in manufacturing, and he's got a distributor network of over 500 distributors all across the country. So again, somebody who has got a very good perspective of how the COVID issue is panning out across the country. Interestingly, Akshay had started working on the COVID issue sometime in early Feb itself. And I'm sure, the audience here will be very interested to kind of know, how did you have advanced information about the severity of what's going to impact us, Akshay. So very much looking forward to hearing you. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to the panel. Lastly, I'd like to invite a good friend, Aaron Solomon. Aaron is currently the managing partner of Solomon & Co. Solomon & Co. is over 100 years old and probably one of India's oldest firms. Aaron is a gold medalist in the solicitor's exam in 1996. As I said, a very good friend. He's a client. I've been a client of his, and I've had the pleasure of doing several such webinars along with Aaron. His views on the Samadhan scheme and how it can be helpful to entrepreneurs to recover dues, and the very practical strategies that he has been able to advise his clients, whether it comes to employment contracts, rental agreements, force majeure clauses, and also in recovery of dues from customers. I'm sure that will be very interesting. So once again, thank you for joining us, Aaron. So while all of us are happy to take questions of any nature, what might be more logical is possibly for the people safety related questions to be addressed to Nilesh. Supply chain, logistics, marketing, distribution, possibly I'll look to Akshay to weigh in with his experience. Issues relating to legal and recovery, possibly to you, Aaron. And if there are any finance related questions, I'm happy to take it up. Yeah, but as I said, all of us have got a cross-functional view. So, we'll kind of chip in with our perspectives as and when appropriate. So with that quick introduction, if I can now turn it over to each of the panelists by turn. And Aaron, if I can please request you to kick off the proceedings. If you can give us maybe a 3 to 4 minute overview in terms of what is it that you're seeing in market, in terms of getting back to on the road to normalcy. What are the types of issues that clients are currently coming to you with, and what are the trends that you're seeing there?
Sure. So thank you, Venkat, for the introduction. I have one slide, which if you don't mind, maybe I can try to share my screen and try to put it up. I think I need permission to do that, or should I just maybe speak of that?
Archana can't hear you.
Ruchika will enable that.
Okay.
Ruchika will enable that.
Or maybe I can go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I hope you can hear me. So I think, thank you, Venkat. I think it's been a fairly challenging journey, I think, for all of us. But I think it's also been learning and evolving for all of us right through this. I've been recently told by a client friend that despite the number of cases going up in India, the level of business activity he sees in our country is a lot higher than that he's seeing in the US, in the European markets. And I think that speaks a lot for the Indian entrepreneurship spirit and the will to learn and the need to adapt to changing times. I think April, what we saw was pretty much a freeze. I think most businesses viewed April as an early summer holiday. Many business decisions were absolute frozen. Many emails were not responded to, and most people were confused on how to deal with the challenges posed by the lockdown and COVID. In May, I think to my mind, we saw many businesses taking steps towards survival, to continuing. Salary cuts, downsizing, reducing activities. of course, dealing with the realities of a non-operational manufacturing. I think we saw that happening in May. In May, we as lawyers dealt with the largest number of inquiries around force majeure and non-payment of rentals, and issues and challenges. Arising from that. I think it really started changing in June. In June, we saw businesses getting back into action, realizing that COVID and the lockdown in a way is a new normal, which businesses will have to deal with possibly for the end of this calendar year and maybe until the end of this financial year. And very interestingly, we saw many businesses adapting. A lot of trade agreements, commission agreements, both for Indian products and also Indians advising on global transactions. Many plastic manufacturers, for example, are venturing into new areas arising from solutions to deal with the COVID challenges of the PPE suits and things around that. So we saw a lot of adaptation to deal with the new challenges, and of course, benefiting from the government schemes. Now, what we have not seen in all of this is dealing with the stress faced by existing businesses. That's not happened so far. I think most businesses have been possibly dealing with the current crisis and the current challenges and putting off the larger discussion on what do we do to save and to continue our past businesses and our core businesses. And I see that's what's going to happen, at least from a legal perspective, as one of the first steps around the reopening and getting back to normal. I call this a restructuring on the slide, but it is really various forms of restructuring which a business would have to consider to get back into the game. My point once, of course, many businesses are starved for money right now, be it by way of debt or equity. So one of the early steps most businesses would need to do is to prepare for a fundraise by separating good assets from bad assets. Many investors, overseas investors and lenders are more likely to invest on an overseas platform rather than in India. So possibly setting up platforms overseas by way of a parent company or a subsidiary to gain a better access to investor markets. Separating personal assets from business assets, registering IPR, which maybe Venkat can speak about some of the steps being taken to reflect IPR value in the books. A founder's agreement, and always the first step is preparing a business plan. In terms of restructuring for cost cutting, I think many of my colleagues from the business world will be able to speak about this better, because that's something already been in progress, but that will certainly continue. Or restructuring to downsize, outsource, or reduce costs. Ring fencing of liabilities is something which we do see happening in a big way over the next few months. Most businesses, even if they are doing relatively okay today, do see the potential risk of facing challenges in a few months, or maybe a year or so down the line. So the need to ring fence personal liability and personal risk from business assets and business risk is something we are already seeing a lot of inquiries about. Many businesses owe money to the promoters, so to implement those arrangements to make sure related party transactions are documented. So in case of insolvency, bankruptcy, there are no inquiries on the promoters. D&O insurance, founders' employment agreement, so there's job security for the founders. That is something which is being looked at. And many companies who are in trouble are looking at different types of bankruptcy protection. Of course, the IBC, the NCLT is not very active nowadays, but they are already taking advice in terms of what are their options for in case of a bankruptcy.
That's it from Aaron?
Yes, I think for now.
Yeah, Venkat.
Hi, Aaron. Did you have another slide to show?
Just the one I had up there, nothing more for now.
Okay, got it. Thank you for that, Aaron. Thank you for those introductory comments. I'm sure we'll kind of come back to you on several of those themes. But it's interesting. I mean, what you seem to be saying is that we are yet to kind of see some of the pain of bankruptcies and insolvencies yet pan out. It looks like, we are all kind of trying our best to deal with the situation here and now. But a lot of the pain is yet to be seen. So we'll kind of come back on that theme. At this point, if we can get back to you, Akshay, and request you to possibly present your initial comments. I know that you have been back to operations, back to normalcy very quickly. I think pretty much from the first week of April, you have been operational. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about what is your experience of getting your company's operations back to normal? And if I can request you to possibly focus your comments a little bit more on availability of labor, on dependency on raw material vendors, on logistic suppliers. So maybe you were ready, but when the ecosystem is not ready, how did you actually deal with that challenge successfully? Over to you, Akshay.
Actually, being in food processing assumes that most food processing businesses are the least affected by the situation, but it's not really so. It depends what side of the business person is in. So at Cremica Foods, we have a business that was quite heavily poised towards the restaurant and food service business. And we had a smaller business in retail. And historically, the business had grown out of a supplier arrangement with McDonald's, which kind of kept the focus on the food service side skewed for many, many years. And we were a little, I think, more clued on to what this germ is going to do, but we had absolutely no idea where we are going to lead, whether this country is going into a lockdown situation or not. Yes, we definitely had trained up our workers and our managers on how to deal with some of these issues technically in the run-up. In early February and March, we had started training our staff on how to conduct themselves to avoid infections, which largely helped us, and our workforce to not get infected while they were actually in a hotspot. In Punjab, the place where the factories had, I think, about 50,000-60,000 NRIs. And that was supposed to be the big trouble spot, which I think they managed quite well. But as soon as the lockdown hit us, I think on 22nd of March, we had kind of, started talking to each other on the potential impact and had come to realize that this is going to be a very big one for us. And the food service business is going to get compromised for the long haul. And we have a small retail business, and it's going to be a very, very big mess. So the next 10 days, by the 31st of March, we had actually really drawn up a revised business plan on how the business is going to survive and conduct itself and get ready for the new situation. Because it's like a complete about turn that suddenly happened. That you have 60-70% of the business suddenly going out. So having said that, the plan for cost reductions, optimizations had been drawn up. Fortunately, the business is not too heavily leveraged, and we are able to, scale up or down our break-evens very easily. Not easily, but we can do it. Of course, it's a huge challenge when you have a 20-year-old, 30-year-old organization and you suddenly have to strip it apart. But it was pretty clear that there's not going to be much choice. So the first thing was, about getting back to business. The second thing was, how do we pay people? So there were a few things that we were very clear about. First and foremost was that we have to get back on track quickly, which means by the second week or so of April, we had started reoperating, even though there was a curfew in Punjab. Fortunately, the run up to the this COVID preparations, we had inadvertently sensitized the local administration, because we were feeling that a lot of factories should actually implement these procedures if they have to run, and we were generally trying to invite officers to come and have a look at how businesses will need to conduct themselves in coming days. And they had a lot of confidence, so they let the units operate even when there was a full curfew in Punjab. So we were actually producing goods. Our workers were allowed to come to the factory even though they had no curfew passes. So the police was very, very clear. Of course, we had done a fair amount of, I would say, social service in and around in terms of helping the poor with their food, etc. And part of the program to, social outreach that helps a business in times like this. So we were off on track very quickly. But at the same time, we had to deal with a whole new challenge. We had to sell things that we hadn't sold suddenly in a very big way. And we were suddenly going to be left with the inventory that's not going to get sold. So all the Horeca items are not going to get sold, and they are short shelf life goods. Well, anyways, all those plans were built up, costs were reduced, plants were restarted. And of course, logistic challenges were there in the beginning, huge ones, because every state had its own law. So we were fortunate that there was a deeper connect with the Ministry of Food Processing that enabled micromanagement of some of those issues. And of course, we were more aligned with government regulations, and all our managers were thick into it. So we were not hesitating to take help from secretary level people in the state or at the government, central government level to get things moving. One example there of trying to get a curfew pass for our distributor in Pune when it was in a curfew area. That some of the friends from Pune helped to get through. And I guess sometimes your colleagues and friends do step in and help out. So that was interesting. So we left no stone unturned. The business started quickly. We were able to, in fact, that was a big thing, because we were the first out of the block. We were able to corner a larger market share, and suddenly the people realized what a big market in retail we'd been missing. And Cremica as a brand had always had a huge amount of goodwill, which we used to calculate on paper but never actuate. But the lockdowns and their resultant in lack of inertia in the competition is somewhere we captured the early startup, pre-startup. And we are today staring at almost 100% increase in our retail business. So fortunately, thanks to that, we will hit 60-70% sales figures in the next month. So which means that business which had compromised 60-70% of our business is going to be back at 60-70%. I think speaks volumes in terms of quicker getting off the block quickly, not taking no for an answer from anybody. And I think some of the principles that were invoked in this was very clear cut, that there's no free lunch. And there's going to be absolutely no free lunch. So people will be paid for performance and people will be paid for work. So in the month of April, we actually paid salaries for 9 days. Month of April, we did deduct salaries for the days of the lockdown when there was no work. We were very clear from day one that, people have to work. And while government officers were, stating that, yes, you will have to pay and there's this and there's that, we were clear that when push comes to shove, we'll check that out in the courts. But we are very clear that every situation affects all of us. So it doesn't affect only the company, it affects the person, it affects the country, and everybody has to play a role in it. And we have to protect jobs, and we can only protect them by being equitable and surviving. And if we don't survive, then there are no jobs to protect. And I think people and the team was also pretty supportive on this, that we've had in this whole situation. Of course, we've thrown out a lot of people, but we've only had 2 resignations out of staff of 700 people. So people are sticking. People love to stick with companies that look after, and especially we are looking after jobs of people. 60–70% of our workforce, chefs, you're not going to get a job, even
So from that point of view, planning played a lot of role. Second piece, already our industry has a huge level of hygiene and safety guidelines. We kind of just leveraged on it and further made it in terms of what was required in this situation. Employee communication, some practical aspects around, and of course making sure that all of us also understand that we have a responsibility. It's almost more than communication and appeal, that in this time we have a responsibility to make sure that our medicines are manufactured. And then very, very practical. So for example, in initial period of time, employees were not very comfortable traveling in buses or cars which have got more than 2, 3, 4, 5 people. So we found some practical solutions that people who have their own two-wheelers or their own commuting options, they come. Then planning and staggering who comes when, and those kind of basic things, we started with about 10–20% capacity in our manufacturing around first week of April, and over a period of time achieved 60–70, and now we are close to 80% capacity. Then I think these were the few practical solutions, in addition to making sure that whatever information is coming in terms of how do we take care of ourselves, that really training and orienting people across the value chain, not just manufacturing, that simply helped. According to me, one of the demonstrated behaviors that we experienced very naturally during this time is about that expression and feeling of collaboration and solidarity. So people were coming and helping each other, and we just kind of built on that, and we did the same with each other, because I was equally scared like you or anyone else. So I think these were some of the practical things which we could just kept on doing. Just we were at it, and today possibly organizations have learned to adapt to it, and now we are thinking about howsoever the future looks like, how do we prepare for it?
So Nilesh, thanks for keeping your comments very concise. I just had one question. Were you at any point in a situation where there was a shortage of labor in the factory, or was that not an issue at all?
At initial period, yes, we were at that situation. So we really had to call up people, really had to reach out to people, really map list who's where, how can we bring whom, including not just production but also quality assurance, because if you don't have quality people, you cannot run it. And we did face the same problem as you mentioned. Some part of the population also went to their respective native places in the initial scare. So that population, some part of that population is still not back, and that is why possibly we are not at 100%.
Got it. Okay. And the way you solved for this is by again communicating to them. In fact, I think it was Akshay was telling me yesterday that in many companies, people have gone, HR managers have gone to the extent of calling up these spouses, their parents, to give them the comfort that the wage earners are safe, and it is okay for them to kind of start coming back to work. So people, companies have taken a lot of effort to kind of convince and communicate labor to come back to work. Yeah.
Including talking to unions and representatives, so that they also help us in this.
Fair enough. Got it. If I can now go to possibly a poll question, Ruchika, if you can just run the second question first, please. And this is a topic that I'm sure is close to all our hearts, which is about how do we recover money from our customers. Ruchika?
I think Ruchika is having some connection issues. When we get to the
Absolutely
poll
no.
a little later, there seems to be some question directed at Nilesh at this point. Do you want to take that, Venkat?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. So one question for you, Nilesh, from Ashish Sihare is, what are the new challenges emerging that you foresee while work from home during the lockdown times?
I think that there are enormous amount of challenges everyone would have experienced. I can just give my own experience. First of all, I think we also have a sales force, so the biggest challenge is that they could not go to hospitals, meet doctors. Of course, it was out of question. So how do we engage sales force during this time? And we really, as many companies did, nothing very unique, but just did it well. In terms of engaging them through upgrading their skills and knowledge base during this time, really preparing for how do we make sure that we are available for physicians and doctors when they need information about our medicines. So some amount of digital communication initially, and now which is kind of really becoming a part of life in terms of very, very structured way, because even for some point, for some duration going forward, we do not see, while the reports are saying that quite a few things will look like normal, but we are preparing that we will always have mix of communication, which is of course physical plus digital. So that's one. Secondly, I think how do we create a rhythm and engagement, and very practical problem in city like Mumbai, our houses are not equipped to really have spaces for work from home for majority of the employees. So some basic orientations around it. How do we make sure that during this time we are still available? Sometimes kind of really getting onto the video, talking to each other just helps, kind of some basic things. But specifically for Salesforce, a huge intervention around skill building.
Got it. Fair enough. At our own company and several of our clients, we now started doing once in a month town halls, where we now basically get the whole organization to kind of come on a single webinar. Several clients I know are kind of running contests where they're able to kind of involve their children, their spouses, their parents. Online prizes are being given away. WhatsApp groups, of course, are extremely active and very, very powerful medium to be able to run some of these engagements. But again, I think the key message coming out of Nilesh seems to be that of constant communication and engagement with the team members. Aaron, if we can come across to you, and probably kind of moving on to the theme of recovery of dues. You had very very practical views on Samadhan, especially now that the IBC limit has kind of gone up to 1 crore. So what are the levers that small to mid-sized companies have to be able to get paid by some of their customers? Any thoughts on that, Aaron?
Sure. So thank you, Venkat. So straight away we jump into the Samadhan scheme, which I think is been under the MSSME Act since the Act came out, but is not very widely known. Is if you are a registered MSSME and you have any amounts due to you, you can file a written complaint with what is called the MSSME Facilitation Council under the Act. This is a statutory body constituted under the Act. The Facilitation Council has powers to cause a mediation. And of course, we have actually participated in many of these mediation sessions. It's typically in the High Court building, in the library, after court hours. They call both the parties in. The other party need not be an MSSME. It could be anyone else, including a foreign company, or Indian or individual. And honestly, I've seen many of these mediations being extremely successful, especially because there's a statutory body, an appointed mediator who's overseeing the entire process. that does bring some leverage upon both the parties to be reasonable about it. If for some reason, if a mediation is successful, it's a new agreement which is put into place and secures the dues. If a mediation is not successful, the MSSME Facilitation Council has the power to take it on itself to convert that into an arbitration. And they have a right to appoint their own panel members as arbitrators or to appoint third-party arbitrators and then continue the same proceeding as an arbitration. This is again an ineffective remedy. We have seen it, especially the mediation being very successful and also very low cost. That is one thing which we are doing. Second thing, of course, is legal notices. Most companies are facing a financial challenge, and that's the reason dues are not being paid. It's not a question of evading dues. In most cases, it's a question of delaying payment of dues, is what we are saying. A company or a business to whom money is due needs to jump the queue. It's a question of getting to the front of the queue so you can get your payment on time. And a legal notice, in many cases, is helping. Also, many companies are in the market to raise debt, to raise equity. And even if you issue a legal notice, it is something which puts pressure on the company to settle your claim before the others. Third is courts are, just sitting for very urgent matters, but arbitrations are being started and are being continued through, of course, video conferences very effectively. So if you have an arbitration clause in your agreement as well, again, possibly for a larger claim, arbitration is a good remedy to avail even during the lockdown. Because arbitrators, lawyers, they all have more availability and hearings are happening quicker.
Got it. What you're really saying, Aaron, is that despite the COVID issue, the MSME Samadhan scheme still continues to operate smoothly on the ground. These mediation sessions are happening online right now.
Yes, mediation sessions are happening online, and of course, the filings of the complaints also are happening online. All of that is online, no need of any physical interaction, and all of that is proceeding smoothly.
Got it. So if we can get in Akshay at this point, Akshay, one of the things that all of us as business people are worried about is the moment you drag someone to the MSME council or you're going to send him a legal notice, particularly in your case, right, when you're kind of dealing with distributors who are almost like family. I'm sure this must be relationships that are kind of spanning many, many years. You're always worried about the reputational impact, right? Taking somebody to court could mean that you will probably never ever get business from them. Yeah, in a situation like this, what are the practical ways that one could adopt to recover money from your customers?
Well, I don't think going to court is an option actually, because it does compromise the relationship permanently. And business, you see, businesses are compromised, so the relationships are more valuable than before. Whatever little business the person is providing you is today far more valuable than before. So for us, that's not an option. Yeah, there are ways and means for a business to extract its money. It can express its inability to supply. I don't have the money, what do I do? I'm there at your beck and call, but my suppliers are not giving me material. And people will find a way and means to prioritize you very quickly because they need the goods too. So you see, in a supply chain situation, going to court should be for delinquent people who are, just using the situation to, go down the wrong path. But for businesses that are working hard to get back on track, the ideal thing is to try and find a way out. And one can squeeze a lever here or there. Nobody minds it. And even if they mind it, they'll forget it very quickly.
Got it. Okay. Got it. Nilesh, if I can come back to you on, one of the challenges with this, with the lockdown coming off is the number of cases has gone up, right? And there is no telling who's going to fall sick when, right? So it may not always be the company's responsibility that a worker in a factory tests positive for COVID. Now, in a situation like this, what we've seen is authorities have demanded that the establishment be shut down for a few days. Right now, as a company, how do you deal with this level of uncertainty? Right, I mean, you can take all the care that is humanly possible within your factory premises, but what a worker or an employee does after he's out of the factory gate, it's extremely difficult for a company to control. Yeah. So any thoughts, Nilesh, on how does because no entrepreneur wants a situation where business is kind of in start-stop mode, right? So any practical tips that you have on how to deal with that?
Yeah, this is a difficult question, Venkat. So let me admit that, because we also learned on the way. First of all, of course, we started with those basics of thermal scanning and checking on some small questionnaire about your health. 3 questions: did you fall sick, or some those kind of everyday collection of data? Because in manufacturing, we do have our own doctor present. Based on that, I think monitoring was one thing, and wherever, for example, and that is how then we started properly guiding people as to who possibly stay home, should not, if there is a doubt, not to take risk, kind of, those kind of initial precautions we took. Initially, yes, I think it was, and we heard about few cases where manufacturings had to be shut down and all that. But later, I don't think everywhere, because the rules also differ in different geographies. So very difficult for me to pinpoint about any particular geography. But later, it was not that you have to shut down entire manufacturing. I think it was also about how you are able to establish to authorities, or to yourself first. I think before authorities, that have we taken care of that place, and have we taken care of all people around it. And there are lots of now if I hear, and I would encourage many of you to find it out about it, is that a lot of government has also, I think, approved some antibody testing and those kind of things, because of course COVID testing nobody can do for employees. It's only authorities who can do. But there are many ways which are, a lot of solutions are coming up. I encourage all of you to look at those kind of options and choose which suits you the most. You know.
Got it. Akshay, any thoughts on that? Is this a problem that you have faced in any of your factories, and how did you choose to deal with it?
I think it's all about training and implementation of protocols. We've had 0 incidents in the factory till date of any person getting infected. In fact, I can share with you that a government officer who was tested for COVID and quarantined had visited us 4 days before he was quarantined, and he did not pass on the germ to anyone, because we were very, very clear and strict about the protocols in the factory. So they visited, they went through the whole operation, and he returned, and nobody got in. So we've had that, the training sessions were on since the beginning of March. And there are teams that are going out into the market. It's not possible to hold them back. And we've had not even two, one instance of a person falling ill because his family got ill. And most of the people have got trained, thanks to these indulgences and repeated instructions on protocols. So they're going into the market and they're keeping safe. But there are still some protocols that companies have to implement. And I think those are important. How do you isolate your deliveries? How do you isolate receipts? How do you isolate paper? Transactions, incoming truckers. So those protocols have to be built, outgoing truckers. Those have to be built and very strictly implemented. We have COVID protocol WhatsApp groups. They are required to post daily trainings and updates every day for everybody to see. So it's a very transparent world today in my company. Everybody knows everything. And it's a daily exercise. So every day there's a new update or a new improvement that has to be put. Just so that, it becomes so much a part and parcel of the company that everybody's conscious and they don't get lax about it. Because it's a real big issue. It's becoming bigger and bigger. But so far, the business, thanks to the implementation of protocols and repeated instructions, we are able to hold forth.
Got it. So I think your message actually seems to be really prevention is better than cure, right? So rather than figuring out how to deal with a shutdown, if somebody tests positive, your focus has been in making sure that people don't contract the virus at all.
Yeah, and also, a few basic rules, like you don't want people to get together in your factory. So rules about no meetings, only meeting online, even sales teams are not allowed to meet. Everybody works straight, alone. Nobody is allowed to meet each other. I don't want one person infecting the other. So if there's one person who falls ill, that's fine. We don't want everybody to fall ill.
Sure, got it. Okay, so ASCENT is the the Q&A box is open, so please feel free to send in your questions. I can see one here from Manikandan, who asks, what is the real possibility of coming out of this corona issues fully and business to operate as usual? So I'll possibly take a crack at this, Manikandan, right? So depending on who you hear, you will see a number of curves, right? People are talking about a U curve, a V curve, and then there is a W curve. So to me, there is really no one reality of this. The impact obviously has been very different across sectors. So companies like pharma, packaged foods, which is represented by say Nilesh and Akshay here, are possibly among the lesser impacted as compared to say maybe a real estate company or a luxury or an event company, which are more badly impacted, or maybe say a QSR chain, for example. So I think we'll have to look at the reality of our own business. So when you look at, and I'm going to take a financial lens on this, it's possibly safe to assume that this crisis is going to last for a while, right? I think from a financial planning standpoint, one needs to be conservative. Make sure that you're not losing cash. I think that's the key, right? And I think Akshay touched upon this when, apologies once again, Akshay, I think you are kind of trying to make this point about prioritization of cash that is available. You've got to be very, very careful on where you want to deploy your cash, right? You've got to keep it focused on areas that are going to be absolutely critical for you to keep the operations running. Everything else is frivolous. You just got to cut out those unnecessary cash outflows. If you're able to survive this period, what we are hearing with most clients, most companies, most stakeholders is that you see through the next 6 months, 12 months, you are able to survive it without losing cash, then I think you're going to be in a great position to be able to take advantage of the opportunities later on. What one should avoid at all costs is to borrow in order to meet your operational deficits. I think that is dangerous, right? Because especially with so many schemes being announced by the government, and it's not been very easy to avail those schemes, incidentally. But even if you are able to avail those schemes, to take debt in order to finance the operating shortfalls in the business is a fairly risky strategy. So that is something that I would urge you to be careful about. You can see another question coming in from Reni Pandya. What would be normal, quote unquote, normal post this silence? Will it be redefined, missing, or continue the way it was pre-lockdown? How do we project our KPI targets and expectations? How long do we wait to do so? Every month it feels like let's wait for the next month and things will start to pick up. Yeah, I think I can totally relate to this situation. So Reni, I think the challenge can be solved. I'm going to give you a practical solution on how to do this. I think you need to have two time frames for doing planning going forward, right? I mean, earlier companies used to do budgeting once in a year, right? And then some of the more evolved, sophisticated companies used to do forecasting maybe twice or thrice in a year. Now, all companies will be forced to do forecasting at least every month, right? So there is a 3-year, 5-year vision that you need to kind of draw out for your company. And to me, more than the numbers in the 3 to 5 year vision, it's about what are the tweaks you can make to the business model today that will allow you to remain competitive and relevant in the 3 to 5 year time frame. But in the extreme short term, when you're looking at, say, the next 12 weeks or next 16 weeks or next 24 weeks, you will have to kind of do the forecast pretty much as often as you require, right? So in many of our clients, for example, what we are doing is to do cash flow forecasts practically every week, right? If it's a very cash tight situation, then literally there is a daily cash forecast that needs to be done. So I think because the uncertainty in the market is not going to go away very easily, that is not in our control, unfortunately. What is in our control is the ability to try and plan with the limited visibility that we have. So if it means greater frequency or greater pivoting in planning, then that's basically what we will need to do. Yeah, let me move on to the next question, which is Naresh Jain. And this is for you, Aaron. How do you get the force majeure clause enforced if your customer is just not willing to accept that the pandemic has affected your delivery capability?
So the legal answer to that is that a force majeure clause, if you have it in your agreement, it can be enforced, through any court of law. So depending on what the dispute resolution clauses state in your agreement, you can go to court to seek enforcement of the force majeure clause. A few things to keep in mind is just because you have a clause in your agreement does not mean force majeure starts applying to you. You need to trigger it. So by sending a notice saying that a force majeure is applicable. Second thing, the person who avails for the force majeure clause could very often be the defendant, could be the one defending. If you seek to avail the force majeure clause, in many cases, depending on what contract you have, could possibly be the one who does not pay or does not deliver or takes advantage of it. So the onus could be on the other party to be the one to go to court and enforce it. That's the second thing to keep in mind. And third, in terms of the practical answer is, I think in most cases, people are availing the force majeure clause not with the intent of going to court and enforcing it, but to create leverage for a renegotiation of the contract. I think what we are seeing in today's day and age, reality has changed, business environment has changed. Most contracts are being reevaluated, renegotiated. To get the other side onto the table to renegotiate a contract and relook at the contract, one of the only ways to do it is by claiming force majeure. So maybe I would follow it up with a request for a meeting, get into a round of renegotiation, and depending on how that pans out, then consider other alternatives.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, Aaron. One other question from my end is, and this has got to do a little bit with what you mentioned earlier, Akshay, on the concept of no work, no pay. And I think, Rajiv Bajaj was in the news in a somewhat controversial manner, I think 2 days back, having made this statement in public. But I'm just kind of curious to get a quick 30-second view from all the participants. Obviously, it's a very sensitive issue. It's an issue that's very close to every entrepreneur's heart. Nobody wants to kind of let go of team members. But in an event where cash flows are so uncertain, and how long can I actually kind of bear the cost? So Akshay, a quick 30 seconds from you on how you're thinking about this situation.
We enforce this strictly for a 90-day period. Post 90 days, it is, work as per actuals. People who are working from home, we are trying to form a policy around how they are going to be paid on a work from home situation. That there should be a certain reasonable reduction to people who are going out in the field, because people who are going into the market and there are people who are sitting at home. So the teams I'm not taking it upon myself to draw these rules or norms. I've left them to my managers to take a call. And some of them are sitting at home themselves. So they have to take the call that how it has to be done. Strictly moving forward with the effect from July, the business has to meet its costs. And if it is not, then it will downsize to suit the particular division's costs, or an area might have to downsize. It's very clear. Either they will accept a reduction in a salary, which may be temporary or permanent, or we'll just have to, ask some people to, step aside for some time. Unfortunately, you're very right about it. You have to conserve the cash. You have to be a going concern, and there's no way that a business can allow itself to slip. And I am not the government. It's the government's duty to basically look after people without jobs. I can't do that.
Got it. Aaron, coming at this from a legal standpoint, any thoughts on how companies can give effect to this?
Sure. So I would really continue what Akshay said. From a legal position, the choices, most employees have been highly supportive of organizations. If you take them into consideration, if you take them into confidence, if it's a salary cut is being implemented in a uniform manner by communicating the need to the employees, we have seen most cases employees supporting it, consenting to it. But in many cases where the employees do not consent to it, like Akshay said, I mean, it's a ground for termination and you would need to downsize. Now, under labor laws, there is nothing specific which says, the downsizing due to COVID is a ground for retrenchment, but we are fairly confident that that could be the position in the law. And if you do need to reduce staff due to downsizing caused by the lockdown and COVID, it would be considered a ground for retrenchment under the labor laws. Of course, in case of white collar, it's based upon the employment contract with notice. So, I mean, people are being asked to leave. The period of notice pay is come down to the bare minimum of, I would say, 30 to 60 days. Nothing beyond that, like we used to see in the heydays, where large or severance packages were paid.
Got it. Good. I think the end of we just overshot our time by about 5 minutes. I know that Nilesh had an hard stop at 5, so he has had to leave. But thank you all for staying back. So to quickly sum up, I think the key messages coming out of our panelists have been, from Akshay, it is a very clarion call that look, take quick decisive actions, put the solvency of business above everything else. Whatever it takes to kind of keep the company going, that actions have to be taken. Some tough decisions, possibly unpopular decisions on the people front, but equally he has tried to be as humane as possible by providing everyone with a subsistence. I think the need for very clear and regular and very open communications with authorities also came out in Akshay's session, where he kind of advised, where he was quite open to actually allow the authorities inside this company for an inspection. And the benefit he had is he didn't have anybody stopping his workers to kind of turn up to work. I think from Aaron's perspective, very useful thoughts on Samadhan, and it is very heartening to know that the councils are kind of operating despite the COVID situation. You also had interesting views on how sending out a notice or possibly invoking a force measure, while the intent may not be to kind of take this to a court proceeding, but could it kind of act as a pressure lever to get the other party to the table and possibly to get them to talk to you. Akshay had a slightly different view on the same subject, where he thought that going legal may not help, but really levering the relationships and possibly trying to see if you can stop supply. And maybe you can get away with it, Akshay, because you've got a brand and the customers do need to buy it. Right, but I'm not sure how many of our fellow ASCENTers are in a similar situation. But nevertheless, I think it is definitely a strategy that might be worthwhile adopting. I think from Nilesh's perspective, the thoughts were really more around regular communications with the workers, with the labor, giving them the confidence that the company is going to be behind them. It's a theme that Akshay reiterated as well, that it's about doing simple things, but doing simple things in a very disciplined manner, very regular manner, to make sure that the probability of infection itself is vastly reduced, and making sure that even if there is one sickness, that sickness does not kind of exponentially impact the rest of the labor force. Yeah, so thank you very much, gentlemen, for these comments. I just want to quickly check with both Aaron and Akshay if you have any closing comments. Otherwise, it's over to you, Archana.
Thank you, Venkat. It's a pleasure to have joined this webinar.
Again, nothing further. Thanks everyone for having us here.
Thank you so much, everyone. Again, to the people who are listening, you will get the recording of these webinar, and please send a few feedback our way. Thank you so much. Thank you, Venkat, for this.
Thank you. See you.
Stay safe. Bye.
Bye-bye.